Well, actually, isn't Ted's real name Raphael? I think so, right? Because that was one of the questions I did have to ask.
Yes, it is.
It doesn't matter.
Ted's opponent in this race is a stone-cold phony named Robert Francis O'Rourke, sometimes referred to as Beto. And he pretends to be a moderate, but he's actually a radical, open borders left-winger.
My goodness. I don't even know where to begin there. Donald Trump talking about phonies. I mean, here's a lifetime Democrat who's given tons of money to Charles Schumer, given tons of money to Nancy Pelosi, given tons of money to Hillary Clinton, given tons of money to the DNC. What a phony that guy is. And now he's pretending he's a conservative, and he's suckered all those people into believing that he's a conservative, and he calls other people phonies. That is some funny stuff. Hey, let's bring in Jacob Soboroff right now. Jacob, listen, I've got some very bad news for you. Your Los Angeles Dodgers are going to be taking on Barnicle's Boston Red Sox, and it could be ugly, my man. It could be ugly.
You guys have more pull around here than I do. I was wondering how to convince my bosses that the most important swing district in America over the course of the next couple of days is left field bleachers at Chavez Ravine, because I'm going to be on the road, unfortunately.
All you have to do is convince Mike Barnicle of that. He'll hook you up.
Yeah, I'll take care of you.
Do me a favor, Mike, please. Talk to the bosses. I threw up in my mouth a little with that Chris Taylor catch on that last game.
Yeah.
I can't wait.
Yeah, that was an incredible series. Brewers Dodgers. That was a good one.
So Barnicle, set up the series for us really quickly before we get to news.
Well, the weather could play a role in the series tonight at Fenway. It's supposed to be drizzled all during the game. That means the ball's not going to fly as far as it usually does. It could affect the grip on the ball for Clayton Kershaw. I still think that the Dodgers are a very good team. Great guy, Dave Roberts is the manager. I think in the long run, it'll be the short run. I think the Red Sox will win this series in 5 games.
Oh, come on, Mike Barnicle.
What?
I think you got it backwards.
Yeah, why?
Yasiel Puig, Justin Turner. I don't know. We probably got news to talk about.
You got him in 5?
In 5. I got him in 5.
Wow.
It's a Sunday night. That's the one night that I can maybe be back.
Clincher, yeah.
Oh, my goodness. All right, Mika, what do we got?
All right, so Jacob Soboroff, you're following Trump's lies about the caravan and also constantly following, thank you, the separations of children from their families at the border. Let's just update people. They have not been able to clean up this mess. This president and his inhumane policy of separating children from their families. Right now, 66 children are still in government custody, and 50 of their parents have already been. They will never. Is there a possibility that some of these children will never be reunited with their families, including one child who's under 5?
Under 5, yeah, no doubt about it, Mika, including the hundreds of parents that were deported before they had the right to get reunited with their parents, earlier this summer. I've been listening to you guys all morning. One thing that I want to add is not only, in my opinion, is the language that we've heard from the president over the past couple of days, obviously racist and completely abhorrent, but it has extreme real-world consequences. And those consequences are the ones that I saw, first of all, this summer with my own eyes when they put children into cages down on the border. But the president then it was a stated deterrence policy. Now it's a stated policy of actually shutting down the southern border and putting armed guards on the southern border, which just makes you realize that the president has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. He's talking about cutting off tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars in commerce to hundreds of thousands of people, probably his supporters all across the country that go back and forth between ports of entry every single day. He's talking about American children that live in cities like Ciudad Juarez and cross into the United States on a daily basis to go to high school in places like El Paso or McAllen, Texas, or Tijuana. And I guarantee you that the policies that the president is talking about putting into place will result in more people dying when they try to cross the border, because they're now running from Americans in order to get in here rather than turning themselves in to seek asylum, an American tradition.
Also joining our conversation, Washington Bureau Chief for the Boston Herald and an MSNBC contributor, Kimberly Atkins. Kimberly, great to see you. We've been talking about the president using this rhetoric and overstating what this caravan is and the threat to America. But he's also blaming the Democrats, who have not been in power now for 2 years or so. President Trump has controlled the White House. Republicans have controlled Congress. He had everything what he wanted in place to stop what he believes is this invasion from the southern border, and yet he continues to blame Democrats.
Right. Well, look, whatever you think about the president, he is very good at messaging to his supporters, to the key constituencies who he's seeking to appeal to ahead of an election. And things like facts have not stood in his way before, and they're not standing in his way now. Yes, he is blaming Democrats for this. He is really demonizing these people who are migrating en masse, in part to remain safe as they make their way through Mexico, because it is a very arduous and dangerous journey, and saying things that we've heard before, that they are criminals, that they're bringing crime, somehow inexplicably mixing in Middle Easterners being in there. He's not even saying terrorists. He's just using Middle Eastern as a code word for terrorists. That, of course, isn't true either, that they're being funded by Democrats, but if you talk to Trump supporters, what reporters do all the time, they say, oh, these aren't people who are in crisis. These are people who are being funded by George Soros, because that is what Donald Trump and other conservatives are saying. And the message is landing. That's the biggest contrast right now between Democrats, who are having a much harder time messaging against it, counter-messaging against this in a way that is resonating and is being repeated by their supporters the way that it is on Donald Trump's side.
You know, by the way, Willie, we heard the name George Soros brought up by the President of the United States. We've heard the name George Soros brought up by backbenchers in the Republican Congress, blaming him for funding these caravans, blaming him for funding one, fake conspiracy after another. Last night, from what I understand, a explosive device was found at George Soros's Westchester home. In part, you've got to point the finger back to the president and these Republican members of Congress that have just been spreading these conspiracy theories that have anti-Semitic overtones to them towards George Soros.
Well, George Soros is the boogeyman. We hear it from Donald Trump's mouth. We hear it from Republicans' mouth that he's funding every dark conspiracy they believe is taking place around the world. And you're right, about 45 minutes to an hour north of New York City, up in Westchester County, where George Soros has a home. He wasn't home, but an explosive device was found in his mailbox yesterday. The police up there detonated it proactively. It didn't explode on its own, but someone sent what they believed was an explosive device to the home. It was placed in the mailbox of George Soros just outside New York City.
Wow. That's...
Well, so Kimberly, I guess the question is, will this work? The president, one lie after another lie after another lie, but I had a relative yesterday talking about this invasion of migrants coming, and I had a college-educated friend email me yesterday asking, how are we going to stop America's borders from being invaded? They're coming. They're coming.
Yeah.
The lie's working.
It is. It lands. I mean, we hear from this. I hear from it from people who tweet or email me after stories that I write about this, that there is an invasion in the country. The phrases that we hear the president say, if we don't have a border, we don't have a country. Well, we do have a border and a country and rules, but there's also reasons why we are seeing these migrations toward the border. And the president now is seeing this as election gold. Republicans, for a while, Republican strategists have been saying that the more the president talks about immigration, the better it is for him. And I think the president also loves to gravitate right around this time before an election, whether it's a special election or the midterms. He graduates toward these culturally divisive issues. I'm sure he will probably tweet about NFL protests again before the elections come in 2 weeks. We have seen him talking about migrants in a way that's very divisive. We saw him last night say, I'm a nationalist. You're not supposed to say that. But use that word. He's not just saying that he's calling himself that, but urging his supporters to use that word. It's that same push against, quote unquote, political correctness, and sort of embracing a term which has been made to stand for not just isolationism in an international context, but really just appealing to a certain constituency, even within the United States, white male constituency, at the exclusion of all others. He's now embracing that word. The closer we get to the election, the more open he is with the use of xenophobic, Islamophobic, racist rhetoric, because he sees this as a campaign advantage.
And Mike, you look at what he's been talking about this invasion coming from Honduras. Of course, he's called Hispanics breeders this past year, accused the Mexicans of being rapists at the beginning of his campaign. You could go down, there's a laundry list, but again, it's not just culturally divisive issues that he's pointing to now. Now, there are racial overtones that are so obvious. He's talking about Middle Easterners in there. But again, we talked about this in 2016. Let's talk about it right now. Border crossings, historically, are at a low point now. And they were at a low point at the end of Barack Obama's presidency, where there was actually a negative flow. Net flow into the United States. More people going back to Mexico than coming here from Mexico. Something, of course, that, again, the president, that would completely undermine the big lie.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter to him, Joe. Words are weapons in his coming out of his mouth. We grow immune to it because we listen to it each day and we talk about it each day, but words are weapons out there. You know, the caravan, Middle Easterners in the caravan, MS-13 in the caravan, George Soros funding it, and we see what happens with a bomb being planted in George Soros's mailbox. But what were you going to say?
I was just going to say, you hear him talk about MS-13, right? And we can repeat over and over again the facts that he's talking about are completely based in fallacy. The Border Patrol chief down in the Rio Grande Valley sector told me in the middle of the separation crisis, the busiest place along the southern border, that MS-13 makes up less than 1% of the people that he sees come through at that time. And that policy was based on the president saying MS-13 was a big threat to our country. But what I wanted to say is, as I've traveled across the country from Mars Hill, Maine at the very top, down to Isla Mirada and Key West, down at the south in Florida, a small group of people will bring up immigration and President Trump's rhetoric. Everybody else brings up their desire to have jobs and to have a good life and to have hope and optimism and prosperity in this country. And part of the conversation has to be us acknowledging that the president is full of it, frankly, when he talks about this stuff, but then just pivoting to talk about what people really want and really need in their day-to-day lives. And I think, as an outside observer, that's part of the Democrats' problem. You see it successfully here and there, but so often they get engaged in these battles with the president over whether or not he's telling the truth. He's obviously not telling the truth. We've got to say that, but then just move on to the things that really matter to people across the country. And so often it isn't this stuff that the president's talking about.
Jacob Soboroff and Kimberly Atkins, thank you both.
Thanks,
and
guys.
coming up on Morning Joe.
I'm a leader. I've always been a leader. I've never had any problem leading people. If I say do it, they're going to do it. That's what leadership is all about.
Our next guest may have a different definition. Retired General Stanley McChrystal literally wrote a book on the topic, and he joins the conversation straight ahead on Morning Joe.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.